After Bob Lee's death in San Francisco, many commentators speculated on social media that the killer was someone homeless and mentally ill. David Sachs, a Silicon Valley investor, said so on his podcast.
But this idea of just releasing these people onto the street, I just think is an outrageous abdication of responsibility.
But the man arrested in the crime turned out to be a tech consultant who knew the victim, according to police. And just like the mistaken assumptions in that case, San Francisco's dangerous reputation does not square with the data.
San Francisco has challenges with crime, with public safety, and we're doing everything we can to deal with it. But just because people are seeing it in a more heightened way because of social media, videos, and sadly, sometimes people jumping to conclusions, it's unfortunately made San Francisco a bit of a target.
Violent crime in San Francisco is at historic lows, and its murder rate is far below most other cities its size, according to police and FBI data. But the pandemic brought a wave of property crime. The bike connection saw its windows smashed repeatedly.
Have you had much in the way of property damage since then?
Thankfully, no. Just kind of vandalism type things, but we haven't had any major attempts to have our bikes stolen.
No big break-ins?
No big break-ins.
What about drug activity on the streets? What do you see about that?
That does seem to be worse. It seems like fentanyl has really gotten to a lot more kids.
And that is where San Francisco really suffers. A fentanyl epidemic here. More than 200 overdose deaths in just the first 3 months of the year has the governor calling in the Highway Patrol and the National Guard to help. The district attorney, Brooke Jenkins, criticized her predecessor's progressive reforms and ran for office on a platform of greater accountability. Prosecutions and convictions are up.
I've taken a very strong approach in sending a message that this is not going to be something that we tolerate or take lightly because of the fact that we have so many overdose deaths.
And should we be in any way doubtful that that's going to make a difference, considering that we're not seeing fundamental numbers like overdose deaths go down? Those problems seem to be just as bad as they've ever been.
It's a twofold situation. We have to have public health resources available to those who are struggling with addiction, while at the same time law enforcement does its job to make sure that those who are peddling fentanyl are taken off the street or at the very least are held accountable.
But while San Franciscans are as safe from violent crime as they were in the 1960s, Jenkins says perception as well as data shapes her priorities, like aggressively prosecuting drug dealers.
Our metric is what the people of San Francisco feel, what the people who come into San Francisco to work and to visit feel. And irrespective of what the data shows, we have a job to do to make sure that we address that feeling.
But the city's public defender says that perception distracts from long-term policies that can actually change the city's drug problem.
Housing, job opportunities, people get more stable, and people get more stable, we're less likely to have these kind of overdose deaths.
And more prosecution does not, in your view, solve that problem?
Not at all. We know that from 50 years of experience.
Jake Ward joins me now. Jake, we got a through line now with fentanyl from the beginning of this broadcast. We just heard the San Francisco public defender say that there are long-term policies he believes can help change some of the underlying issues here. What might we see? What could a city like San Francisco do to address it?
Well, I think, Garrett, that, for people who visit the city, of a weekend, the surface level trouble you see has to do with homelessness and mental illness and, of course, drug abuse on the streets. But when you live here, as I do for as long as I have, you begin to see that there are other bigger problems. There is, for instance, no inpatient facility for mental health treatment in the city limits. You have to go all the way to Napa, more than an hour away, to get to something like that. We don't have some of the big facilities that one needs to address the extraordinary problems that afflict people living without housing here. And that's not even talking about the lack of housing itself. We're coming off right now this being one of the most expensive real estate markets in the world. That may, of course, change as the economic downturn continues here in San Francisco. But, right now we just don't have the housing or the treatment for people. And that's where public defenders and other experts say we should be putting our muscle not behind continuing to prosecute drug dealers as we have for so long in the war on drugs area.
Finding a way to fight crime and improve safety in cities, and the perception of safety is going to be such a big issue in all these different cities coast to coast. Jake, I appreciate your reporting on this issue so much. Thank you.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.